when the boy shouted, "Don't drink that!" No one at the event expected what would happen next. It was a sunny day, and one of the city's most exclusive charity events was taking place in a luxurious garden overlooking the river. This was the kind of place where champagne glasses sparkled under the sun, and conversations were punctuated by restrained laughter. People in expensive suits and designer dresses moved from one flower-adorned table to another, while waiters offered exquisite appetizers. But for Jason, an 11-year-old black boy, this scene felt far from his reality. Dressed in an old faded t-shirt and carrying a worn-out box of bottled water, he walked between the parked cars trying to sell anything he could to earn money for his next meal. Jason knew he wasn't welcome here. The security guards watched him closely, as if he were an intruder on forbidden territory. But hunger and determination were stronger than fear. He had to sell this water to ensure he could eat later. As he walked along the event's perimeter, something caught his attention. On the other side of the garden sat a woman of undeniable presence, drawing everyone's attention. This was Victoria Scotch, a billionaire known for her philanthropy, but also for her reserved and complex nature. She sat at a table with other influential guests, appearing untouchable, surrounded by an aura of power and elegance. She wore a sleek black dress, and her jewelry sparkled like stars under the daylight. A glass of white wine sat on the table before her, and light-hearted conversation flowed around her. Jason watched from afar, not knowing exactly why, when a tall man in an elegant suit approached Victoria's table. His expression was calm, but something about him seemed off. Jason saw the man lean over the table, as if adjusting something, and for a moment his hand slipped toward Victoria's glass. The movement was swift, almost imperceptible, but it set off alarm bells in Jason's mind. He frowned, trying to process what had just happened. Something wasn't right. Victoria, engrossed in conversation with another guest, noticed nothing. The man quickly stepped away, disappearing into the crowd. But Jason couldn't take his eyes off him. His heart pounded. He couldn't explain why, but his instincts screamed that he had to act. As Victoria reached for her glass, Jason bolted forward. He dropped his box of water bottles on the ground and ran toward the table, shouting, "Don't drink that! Please, don't drink it!" His voice cut through the air like a blade. Conversations halted instantly. All eyes turned to him. Victoria froze, holding the glass inches from her lips. Her gaze reflected a mix of surprise and irritation as she looked at the barefoot boy standing there panting next to her table. "Who let this boy in?" one guest asked with clear disdain. A security guard was already moving toward Jason to remove him, but the boy kept speaking, his eyes wide and his voice trembling. "Please, ma'am, I saw him put something in your glass. I swear I saw it. Don't drink it, please." A heavy silence followed. Victoria studied Jason, trying to determine if he was lying or hallucinating. The guard grabbed the boy by the arm, but Jason resisted, locking eyes with the billionaire. "I know no one believes me because I'm just a homeless kid," he said firmly, despite his fear. "But I couldn't stay silent. I saw what he did." Victoria, clearly unsettled, placed the glass back on the table. "Let the boy go," she ordered, her tone leaving no room for argument. The guard hesitated but obeyed. Victoria crossed her arms and turned to Jason. "All right, boy. You say you saw something. Who was it?" Jason pointed toward the direction where the man had disappeared. "It was him. The tall man in the gray suit. He touched your glass when you were distracted." Guests began whispering among themselves, turning to look where Jason pointed. But the man was already gone. Victoria narrowed her eyes. There was something in Jason's unwavering determination that made her pause. "Find that man and bring him back," she ordered one of her guards, "and send this glass for testing immediately." The atmosphere shifted dramatically. The carefree ambiance was replaced by tension and suspicion. Jason stood his ground, nervous but convinced he had done the right thing. He knew he had to speak up, even if no one believed him. Victoria, meanwhile, stared at the glass as if it held a puzzle she needed to solve. Her expression was unreadable, but for the first time, Jason sensed that she saw him as someone worth listening to. She studied Jason's face intensely, making him feel even smaller. But despite his trembling hands, he stood tall. A moment later, the guard returned, shaking his head. "The man is gone, ma'am. We searched the perimeter, but he disappeared." Victoria frowned, her eyes returning to the glass still sitting on the table. Her mind replayed Jason's words. There was something about this boy, his courage, his willingness to risk everything to warn her, that felt more genuine than she wanted to admit. "Call an expert immediately," she commanded, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "I want this glass tested now. And alert security at the exits. No one leaves until we get answers." The murmurs among the guests grew louder. Some glared at Jason with disdain, while others hesitated, torn between skepticism and curiosity. To many, he was just a street kid who had crashed the event, but to others, Victoria's swift response and Jason's firm stance raised real questions. Minutes later, a chemist from Victoria's security team arrived with a portable test kit. Under the watchful eyes of everyone present, he examined the glass. The silence was suffocating. Victoria remained seated, her expression unwavering. Her eyes flicked between the chemist and Jason. Jason, in turn, gripped his worn-out box of water bottles like a shield. He refused to look away, though he felt the weight of everyone's judgment pressing down on him. After what felt like an eternity, the chemist looked up. His face was a mix of shock and concern. "Ma'am," he began hesitantly, "there are traces of a toxic substance in the drink. I can't determine exactly what it is without further testing, but it definitely shouldn't be there." His words hit like an explosion. A collective gasp rippled through the garden. Guests whispered anxiously among themselves. Victoria remained motionless for a few seconds before slowly rising. Her expression was firm, lips pressed into a thin line. "Call the police," she instructed her guard. "I want this investigated immediately." As the guard stepped away to carry out her orders, Victoria turned back to Jason. This time her gaze held something different, a mix of respect and curiosity. "You really saw this happen?" she asked, her voice softer, but still authoritative. Jason nodded vigorously. "Yes, ma'am. I saw him add something to your glass. He thought no one was watching, but I was." Victoria tilted her head slightly, studying him. "Why didn't you just stay quiet?" she asked. "You could have walked away and avoided all this trouble." Jason hesitated, clutching his box tighter. He knew he had only one chance to say something she would take seriously, because no one else would have spoken up. Finally, he answered, "If it were my mom in your place, I'd want someone to do the same for her." Another silence fell over the garden. Victoria inhaled deeply, processing his words. In the distance, sirens signaled the approaching police. When the police arrived, the event was already in a state of controlled chaos. Guests whispered in small groups. Some avoided looking at Jason, while others moved closer out of curiosity, wanting to know more about the boy who had saved the billionaire. Victoria explained the situation to the officers, handed over the glass for forensic analysis, and described the man Jason had identified. "We have cameras all over the event. If this man really did what the boy said, we'll find the footage," one of the officers assured her. Then all attention shifted to Jason. One of the officers approached him, his gaze stern but not hostile. "Are you sure about what you saw, kid? Can you describe the man in more detail?" Jason nodded and began to recount everything he remembered. A gray suit, slicked back hair, polished shoes shining under the lights. As he spoke, he could feel Victoria's eyes on him, as if she were trying to see something in him beyond just his words. The next few minutes were filled with growing tension. Police officers reviewed the cameras. Guests continued whispering, and Victoria stayed close to Jason, as if making sure he wouldn't be ignored. When one of the officers returned with security footage, the confirmation was immediate. The man Jason had described had indeed put something in the glass. "He's still on the premises," the officer said, glancing at his colleagues. "We'll find him." As the police quickly moved to locate the suspect, Victoria turned to Jason. Her serious expression softened, and she placed a hand on his shoulder. "Today you saved my life," she said with such sincerity that Jason's throat went dry. "And I won't forget that." Jason only nodded, unable to find the right words. For a moment he felt like, for the first time in a long while, someone truly saw him. The search for the suspect heightened the tension in the air. Guests murmured anxiously as the officers spread out, checking every corner for the man who had tried to poison Victoria. Jason stayed close to the billionaire, gripping his box of bottled water tightly, as if it were a shield. He could feel the stares of everyone around him, But this time, they weren't just filled with disdain. There was curiosity, respect, and even a hint of admiration. Victoria, on the other hand, seemed lost in thought. Her gaze followed the police officers, but deep down, she was clearly contemplating something far beyond the night's events. Finally, she turned back to Jason. "How old are you?" she asked, her tone not entirely casual but not harsh either. 11, ma'am, Jason answered, hesitating slightly. "Do you sell water every day?" she continued. "Every time I can. It's how my sister and I survive." His response was direct, but there was a weight behind his words, as if there was a whole story he wasn't sure he should share. "Your sister?" Victoria asked in surprise. "Where is she now?" Jason looked away for a moment before answering. "She's at home, well, at the place where we're staying. I do everything I can to take care of her, but it's not always easy." His voice wavered slightly, but he quickly steadied himself, as if he had long since learned to hide any sign of weakness. Victoria remained silent, processing his words. Something in Jason's tone, in his resilience and honesty, seemed to move her more than she expected. Meanwhile, the police had found the suspect. He had tried to blend in with the staff in the event service area, but security cameras had exposed him. As the officers handcuffed him, he struggled to keep his composure, teetering between cold confidence and panic. "You have no evidence against me? This is a mistake," he shouted as they led him away. One of the officers approached Victoria, maintaining a professional posture. "Ma'am, we've detained him. He denies everything, but the footage and the boy's testimony are strong evidence. We'll move forward with the case." Victoria nodded, but her focus remained on Jason. She knew that without him, the night could have ended in tragedy. When the officer walked away, she turned to the boy once more. "Jason, tell me the truth. Do you do this every day? Walk the streets selling water just to survive?" He nodded, his eyes reflecting both pride and resignation. "I don't have a choice. My sister is young. She can't work, and—" He trailed off, took a deep breath, and continued. "This is what we have to do." The raw honesty in his voice caught Victoria off guard. She had spent years building wealth and power, crafting an empire with iron determination. But now, standing before a boy who barely had enough to get by, she felt small in comparison to his courage. As the event wound down and guests slowly dispersed, Victoria called one of her personal assistants. "I want you to find out everything about this boy," she instructed, nodding toward Jason. "Where he lives, who he's with, and what he needs." The assistant hesitated for a moment, but quickly nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Jason watched their conversation cautiously. He didn't understand why Victoria was taking such an interest in him, but he sensed that something was about to change. "Jason," Victoria said, turning back to him, "tonight, you saved my life. Without you, I wouldn't be standing here right now, and I doubt anyone else would have stepped in." Jason frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Victoria placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, this time with a softer touch. "I want to help you and your sister. No one should have to live the way you do. Tonight you saved me. Now it's my turn to do something for you." Jason stood frozen, trying to process her words. He had never expected anything like this, especially from someone as powerful and distant as Victoria. I don't even know what to say." For the first time that evening, Victoria smiled. It was small but genuine. "You don't have to say anything right now. Just let me help." As Jason gave a hesitant nod, he had no idea that this moment would mark the beginning of changes beyond anything he had ever imagined. In the days following the event, Jason's life began to shift in ways he never could have foreseen. True to her word, Victoria mobilized her team to investigate his and his sister's situation. She discovered that they were living in a tiny room in a temporary shelter, sharing space with other families struggling to survive. Jason's sister, Callie, who was only 7 years old, suffered from severe asthma, worsened by their poor living conditions. Victoria didn't waste any time. Within days, she had secured them a new home, modest but safe and comfortable, a place where the children could start fresh. She also hired a private doctor to take care of Callie's health and provide the necessary treatment. But Victoria knew that just giving them a home wasn't enough. She wanted to give Jason a chance to build a future. One morning, as Jason helped Callie pack her new backpack for school, a limousine pulled up in front of their house. Victoria stepped out, as impeccably dressed as always. but with a warmth in her eyes that Jason was beginning to recognize. In one hand, she held a folder, in the other, a bag. "Jason," she called with a gentle smile, "I have something for you." He rushed to the porch with Callie following close behind, her curiosity evident. Victoria handed him the bag. Inside was a new outfit. Not just any outfit, but the uniform of one of the city's top schools. "What is this?" Jason asked, holding the uniform as if it were made of glass. "This is your next step," Victoria said, passing him the folder. "You've been accepted into St. James Academy. It's one of the best schools in the city, with full scholarships for talented students. You'll have everything you need to succeed, and if you work hard, you can achieve anything." Jason was silent, staring at the uniform in the folder, his mind racing. He had dreamed of opportunities like this, but never imagined they could be real. "I don't know if I can," he finally admitted in a quiet voice. "I don't know if I'm good enough." Victoria knelt down so she was at eye level with him, gripping his shoulders firmly. "Jason, you've already proven that you're stronger and smarter than most adults I know. You saved my life with your courage and awareness. If you could do that, you can do anything. Just promise me you'll try." He nodded, still trying to process it all. Callie beamed and hugged her brother. "You can do this, Jason. I know you can." In the months that followed, Jason began his new journey. The transition was tough. He felt out of place among students who came from wealth and privilege. But over time, he found his footing. His determination and intelligence set him apart, and soon he earned the respect of his classmates and teachers. Victoria remained a part of his life, not just as a distant benefactor, but as a mentor. She visited him regularly, helped him with assignments, and encouraged him to dream bigger. To her, Jason wasn't just a way to repay a debt for saving her life. He was a reminder that anyone, no matter where they come from, can achieve great things if given the right opportunities. Years later, now a young man full of ambition, Jason stepped onto the stage of a conference focused on social justice and support for at-risk youth. He shared his story, from selling bottles of water on the streets to the moment a stranger's kindness changed his life. "My story is a reminder," he told the audience, "that each of us has the power to change someone's life. Sometimes all it takes is for one person to believe in us, to see us when the world ignores us." In the crowd, Victoria listened, deeply moved. She had never once regretted the day she chose to help that brave boy. And now, as she watched him inspire so many others, she knew she had done the right thing. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Acts of kindness can change lives and create ripples that reach farther than we can imagine. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories. See you next time.